Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to our Light of Kailash series of talks. And we're very happy today. It's a great pleasure to introduce our speaker for today, Lopen Phuntsho. He's one of Bhutan's leading Buddhist scholars, and he's the founder of the Lopen Foundation, which is doing very interesting work. He's very well known for his books on Buddhism, especially his massive History of Bhutan, fascinating in-depth book of the history of Bhutan. And today he's going to give us a talk on a somewhat different and more unusual theme about how to apply the Buddha's teachings in business. And this will show us how Buddhist wisdom can also offer practical guidance for anybody involved in ethical leadership, entrepreneurship, and this can benefit people and society in general. So please join me in welcoming Lopen Phuntsho today. He'll talk for about an hour, and then we'll have some questions and answers at the end. So you're welcome to write your questions in the chat or to ask them directly to Lopen at the end. So thank you for joining us, and thank you, everybody, for being with us today.
Thank you, Jamyang. I know you have asked me many times, and somehow we never managed to get a mutually convenient time. And finally, I'm here. And I want to firstly say Tashidelek, Kuzuzangpo, greetings to all the members. It's evening here in Bhutan, so good evening. As Jamyang shared, it's not going to be a very academic presentation tonight. I often jocularly say that I'm a pracademic, a practical academic, trying to take the findings and the knowledge from my academic research and apply them in practice as far as possible. And I've been trying to do so mainly in the realm of education, entrepreneurship, and cultural documentation. So what I would like to share today would be something that I've been doing for a couple of decades now in taking the Buddha's teachings, the Buddhist wisdom, into our sort of ordinary way of life. I have got some slides to share, so let me first share this slide. Let me slide. No, sorry. Here, but share and let me go to presenter's view. Yeah, so here you go. Greetings from the capital of Bhutan. This is actually the ancient capital, the first capital. At night, it's already dark here. Normally, now here in our part of the world, as native Buddhists, we are sometimes into this unfortunate situation of outsourcing Buddhist practice to experts, often having monks to do Buddhist practice for oneself, and sometimes also taking a specific time or a specific amount of one's income and savings, and then dedicate that towards religious work. So that is kind of a very habitual practice that happens in Buddhist countries, having some people like priests and monks to perform rituals for you, and then doing a ritual during a specific period, and counting that as practice of Dharma. And sometimes we overlook the fact that Dharma should be part and parcel of our life, and that we should bring in the Buddha's wisdom into all aspects of our living. And also, in most Buddhist societies, and I think also generally speaking, when people think about the Buddha, we think of the Buddha as a spiritual figure, founder of a religion. He was also a kind of a reactionary, going against the norms and givens of his time. He was a revolutionary thinker in changing the cultural and spiritual thoughts. He was a regenerative thinker in reappropriating and reinterpreting the um, spiritual topics of his time, and also an innovator who found new solutions to problems in the world. But above all, he was a pragmatist, somebody who didn't indulge in theoretical discussions and intellectual exercises, but rather sought practical applications that can bring about a positive impact in this. So we sometimes forget to see that the Buddha was a very practical teacher. For instance, when we look at his first sermon, when he taught his 5 disciples, the first sermon he delivered in Varanasi, in Deer Park, where he declared the Four Noble Truths. This is how it will be presented in a text. He basically is supposed to have delivered the um, discourse on the Four Noble Truths as his first sermon. That of suffering, that life is full of suffering in birth, suffering through aging, illness, death, and so on. And then there is the origin of suffering. The suffering comes from causes. And then the cessation of suffering, the cessation of craving and cessation of attachment and so forth, which leads to suffering. And then to the cessation of the right path. So if you go to in a monastery, this teaching is delivered in a very serious manner as a very important teaching in Buddhism. But if you look at it from a more sort of angle, what the Buddha taught was really a problem solution. What the Buddha was saying, that life is full of problems. There are problems in life. Sickness is a problem, aging is a problem, birth is a problem, and so forth. And the first truth is really that there is a problem. And the second truth is the origin of the problem, the causes that bring about problem. And the third truth being the solution to this, both the path leading to the solution. So this is how you can see the Buddha's teachings on Four Noble Truths as a problem-solving strategy. In this respect, I think the Buddha was probably one of the earliest management gurus, you could say, if you take his teachings on Four Noble Truths in such a sort of management context. The Buddha is said to have taught this teaching on Four Noble Truths through 3 rounds. First, he says there are problems. Round, he's supposed to have said one must identify the problems. There is a cause of problem, and one must sort of eradicate the cause of the problem. Then there's the solution of the problem in the first round, and second round he says one must seek and attain the solution to the problem. And then in the second round he again says one must follow the path to the solution. So in first round he just mentions the Four Noble Truths. Second round he tells them what one must do with the Four Noble Truths. And then in the third round, he's supposed to have, I've identified all the problems. There's nothing more to be identified. I have traced and eradicated the cause of the problems. There's nothing more to be eradicated. I've sought the solution and attained it. There's nothing more to be attained. And I followed the path to the solution. There's nothing more to be followed, and so forth. So the Buddha is supposed to have taught this in 3 rounds. And then you have elaborating the path, the Eightfold Path. Right view, right intention, right speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, and concentration. Now, often we look at this as a very spiritual Buddhist topic. But then what we have been also doing in the business context in promoting social entrepreneurship here is we've been taking this Eightfold Path as a way for an entrepreneur to think about the project. First important thing is that you must have the right view or right vision, which basically is about a full understanding of the situation, of the ecosystem, the legal, financial, social, cultural, environmental, and whatever aspects that one needs to know. One has to have a full view of the situation. And with such understanding and view, one can then come up with an idea, which is right intention, a wish to do something. And that idea, which initially is a very weak sort of thought, becomes slowly, as it's molded, becomes a proper sort of intention. And then further, it gets strengthened as a determination and a commitment. So after having full understanding or right view, one gets then right intention. And then one has this idea or this plan. One has to communicate it, like pitching a business proposal. One has the idea, and now it's time to communicate it either in written form or in oral forms to share the idea, share the intention and the thought with others. And then such communication is followed by action, actual practice and implementation, sort of walking the talk. And as one continues doing something, an action repeatedly as a source of one's living, that turns into livelihood. So you have livelihood as the fifth path. And as one adopts something as a livelihood, like teaching or medical practice or whatever, business, it sort of becomes a habitual practice as you keep doing it. And then more importantly, you also go through fatigue, that whatever you do repeatedly gets tiresome and boring. And one often goes through this difficulty of giving up through fatigue. So especially in the case of entrepreneurs, it's a very lonely journey, and people often give up exhaustion. And that's when bring in effort to bring in effort or enthusiasm and zeal to sort of boost the morale and put more sort of diligence into the project. And then as one keeps putting extra effort and making things work, the problem that happens is it turns into a drudgery. One sort of habituated with the process ends up doing things mindlessly, and that's where one has to do things with awareness, conscientiousness. And then finally, as one pushes through with whatever, and one of the big challenges is distraction. That any major effort or project one puts in, there's always distraction which can make one fail. So here, finally, the eighth path is about bringing concentration, bringing focus on the project, on the work. So we take this right eightfold path as a way for an initial idea of what one wants to do, and then pitching, and then implementing the project, and then taking it as a source of living, putting more effort, doing it mindfully, and then focusing on it until one succeeds and reaps the results. So this is how we often talk about the right eightfold path in the context of entrepreneurship. And I think the Four Noble Truths, going back to the Four Noble Truths here, is something that Maitreya presents using the Buddha's analogy of medicine. The Buddha has often presented his truths using the metaphor of medicine, that suffering like illness is something that one must diagnose, and only having diagnosed, one then can trace the cause and avoid the cause, and through that attain the solution, or in the case of illness, the health. And in order to attain that health, one must go through the specific treatment. So the Four Noble Truths is presented with the metaphor of medical treatment. And the path is really like the treatment that one must follow diligently, step by step, expediently. And we often use this here with entrepreneurs. Well, at least ask the entrepreneurs to do it. And some of them, they just implement this by having a very simple chart like this. I had a cousin who was looking at the problems in Thimphu municipality. It was easy to bring together all the engineers and stakeholders and say, what are the problems? And let's now prioritize these different problems that the city faces. And then what gives rise to these problems, and let us try to get rid of the causes, the conditions that lead to these problems. What is the solution? Let's seek it. Let's get the solution, and then do whatever is necessary as a path to seek that solution. So very practical, easy for strategy for one to address issues in life. So in terms of sort of being astute and thinking smart, of solving problems, the Buddha's first sermon itself, without even having to go into the lengthy Buddhist canon or canonical literature, even in the first sermon, you find a way of being very smart in problem solving. But then one has to again remember that the Buddha's focus was not on solving a specific problem. Now, there is the problem of the problem. If, for instance, when we talk about problems, we have to think about whose problem. The question of identifying the problem comes up. One man's solution would be other man's problem. Now, we know for now, for instance, US's solution is Iran's problem, and Iran's solution is Israel's problem. Russia's solution is Ukraine's problem. So, in the same way, in the business world, a business may have a loan to pay back and therefore hike the price as a solution. But that solution may again create a problem for a single mother who is trying to make ends meet and can't afford the new prices. So one has to then know that one must go beyond just being smart for oneself to address the problems. And that's why I think the Buddha, when talking about the path, has the word samyak in Sanskrit, yangdapa in Tibetan. Right. Now we have to know which problem, and the problem shouldn't be a specific individual problem. It should really be aimed at solving the problem for a bigger, greater cause, greater community or country or the world, or the sentient beings. And that the path leading to such problem solving should also be a right one, a morally correct one. So we have from here a new sort of moral, ethical addition. No, in addition to using the Buddha's right eightfold path as a very strategic means to seek solution to a problem, we now need to now also bring in the moral, ethical compass. We have to have the right vision. And I think when we talk about the right vision, there are many things that we need to know in order to get a very objective, very responsible, very useful understanding of the situation. And among them, I think one of the most critical, the cardinal sort of view or understanding, outlook one has to have that one can learn from the Buddha's teachings is the outlook or the understanding of dependent arising, of interdependence. And in the Buddhist world, this verse is chanted in so many rituals. Most people don't even know what these verses say, but this verse is being used to consecrate, as many of you may know, consecrate temples and statues, and also to create auspiciousness during ritual. It is one of the most common verse, which how things come from causes and conditions. The Buddha has also of such causes and conditions. So I think dependent origination, interdependence, is an important view to have. Is the most important right view one has to have, and given particularly in today's world where we are intensely interconnected, we can appreciate the Buddha's theory of interdependence much more in today's highly globalized world. And the gist of the Buddha's theory of independence is that things don't come out of nothing, and that things do not come from an eternal cause. So he avoids both nihilism and eternalism. And then he also argues that things do not come from a personal cause. And then that the results correspond to the cause. If the cause is a rice seedling or a rice seed, then the harvest will be rice harvest. If it's a chili seed, it will lead to chili harvest. So the results and causes correspond to each other. And then this other factor that as causes give rise to results, they can expand, they can multiply. So these are the main things that one has to keep in mind, I think, to really appreciate how things work. And especially when you're getting into a project, it's important to know exactly what cause leads to what result and how they come about. And this kind of view becomes critical for understanding. Then the second most important, view or outlook, again, one need to have is the Buddha's focus on the inner state of the mind. How the mind, the inner state of the mind or the inner spirit, as you may call it, is a bit tricky sometimes in translating sem or vijnana, chitta, Sanskrit. In Tibetan, you have sem, you have namshe, you have yit, which covers the entire world of emotions, concepts, and so forth. That inner mind is so important that you find in the Buddha teachings like of Dharmapada, which is like the compendium of the teachings. The first verse makes this claim that mind is the forerunner of all things, and all things are mind-made, and mind is the chief. So this understanding that the inner state of the mind is the primary cause is also so important, especially for an entrepreneur, because a lot of people get into this state of in this wrong belief that it is through external support that one can really succeed. But most of the successful social entrepreneurial journeys are results of the sort of indomitable will and the courage within, the sort of unique ideas within. So we stress a lot on the inner state of the mind being the most important asset there, the primary asset for any project. So these two, I think, are so important. Then, of course, focusing on the mind here in the Himalayan Buddhist world, you have this phrase being sort of bandied around a lot, Shwetam Chikitsawa Sem. Mind is the root or the foundation of all phenomena. That sort of puts a lot of focus on the inner state of the mind. I show these books. These are the Kanjur and the Tenjur. People often wonder what the vast Buddhist canonical works talk about. We have about 103 to 112 volumes of the translations of the words of the Buddha, the Kanjur, depending on the edition. Some editions have fewer volumes than others. And then you have about 225 to 230 volumes of the translations of the commentaries on the words of the Buddha. So altogether, some 350 volumes or so, which are thick with 500-600 sort of leaves. In some cases, I mean, definitely yes. And if you ask what these Buddhist teachings, Buddhist corpus, I often say to 30% of these books will deal with the inner state of the mind in its ordinary situation. So it's really a deep psychology of understanding the different levels of states of the mind, what provokes attachment, what provokes hatred, and so forth. A very thorough study of the ordinary state of the mind. And then you have a good 60-70% of these teachings talking about how to transform, how to train and improve this ordinary state of mind into a better one, a distracted mind into a focused one, an aggressive mind into a calm, peaceful one, and a dull mind into an intelligent, sharp one, an egoistic, selfish mind into something that's compassionate and altruistic. So the vast amount of Buddhist literature, theories, philosophies, and even art, rituals, chantings. Some portion of these canons talk about what happens when the inner potential of the mind is fully harnessed, when that inner capacity is fully developed, when one becomes the Buddha? What kind of clairvoyance would the Buddha have? What kind of compassion would the Buddha have? What kind of composure would the Buddha have? And as a result of the inner transformation, what kind of external experience would the Buddha have? So it's mainly these three things that the Buddhist corpus talks about, really focusing on the inner state of the mind. I quote this from Aryadeva in his book 400 Verses, where he says, Buddhists, Jains, and Brahmins practice their religions with their mind, eyes, and ears, respectively. This is why I forget Buddhism. So Aryadeva is basically saying, in a slightly sarcastic manner, one could say perhaps, that the Buddhists practice their religion through the mind, the Jains through the eyes, because the Jains are very well known for their visual awareness, sweeping the roads they walk on and sieving the water they drink and so forth. And the Brahmins, basically the tradition following the Vedas, they rely a lot on oral transmissions of the Vedas. So they focus more on the auditory faculty. So Aryadeva says basically he's following the teachings of the Buddha because it focuses on the inner state of the mind. And then I like my favorite author, Shantideva, who makes this proclamation. Those who do not know the secret of the mind, the supreme essence of Dharma, they wander hopelessly in this world, though they wish to gain happiness and overcome suffering. So this is how important understanding the inner state of the mind and its role is to all the great Buddhist masters. And this is what we can learn from them to work on any project, that to really know how things come about through interdependence, through many different causes and conditions. And among all those causes and conditions, it is the inner willpower, the inner self-commitment, inner determination that plays the most important role. So we have right intention, the second. After the right view, we have right intention. And again, when I talk about the importance of the inner state of the mind, a very negative mind can also bring about big negative consequences. So therefore, it's important to have a very positive state of the mind, which will bring about great positive results. So it's important to look at the inner moral quality of the state of the mind. And this is one of the most common lines quoted in the Himalayan Buddhist world, coming from Tsongkhapa, who wrote this poetry with no vowel signs. And here he says, Sampasana Sadanlame, Sambanyana Sadanlame, in all parts and stages are good if the intention is good, all the parts and stages are bad if the intention is bad. Basically, when you look at the moral theory of different religious traditions, some base it on what the say spiritual higher force like the God through that specific canon or book determines as right or wrong or good or bad. In some cases, you have right and wrong decided by consensus through a community, like modern laws. And then there are some theories where you have some actions being intrinsically right and intrinsically wrong. The Buddhist moral theory was really volitional. It's based on the intention, on the state of the mind, that if the intention is right, then what follows as actions also is morally right, although it may not necessarily lead to the expected results, but nonetheless, the actions become virtuous. If the intention is negative, the actions become negative. So that is, intention is the main moral sort of determiner. And then having had the positive virtuous intention in whatever one does, especially in terms of communication and presentation, it's not only important to have effective communication, very articulate, very convincing communication, but also a communication that is morally positive, something that has no flaws. And the main four flaws in Buddhist speech are either gossip or harsh word, speech that sows discord, and then telling lies or telling what's not true. So avoiding the four main flaws and then having 8 qualities that Shantideva presents. Speak calmly and coherently, clear in meaning, so with clarity, and pleasantly. Without attachment or aversion, so not motivated by strong attachment for oneself or aversion for others, and speak gently in moderation. So it's important to again think about not only effective communication, but a communication that is morally correct. And then action, of course, right? Action has to be a virtuous action, action that is non-harming, that doesn't bring about any harm to other beings or oneself, and if possible, an altruistic action that brings about benefit. So here you have in the Buddhist theory of action and result, virtuous actions which leads to good results, that's happiness, non-virtuous actions leading to bad results or suffering, neutral action not really having any results. And I present again these because these are very basic concepts, basic theories of Buddhist moral theory of good and bad actions. I think most people know this, but often we are always after very advanced high teachings like Dzogchen and Mahamudra and whatnot, and overlook the most fundamental ethical precepts that the Buddha has taught. I will not elaborate on this because you may all already know them. If you don't, please bring it up later on as a question. Then as one engages in the action and has something as one's source of living, as one's livelihood, again, it's very important to have an ethical, righteous life, wholesome form of livelihood, and not just engage into just any livelihood that is profitable, that is sort of rewarding in material sense, rewarding in this world and this life for oneself, but it has to be a livelihood that is much more wholesome and beneficial to both oneself and others. And then again, talking about effort, one can put a lot of effort and have a lot of enthusiasm and diligence, but it could be also in a wrong cause. So it's important for the Buddha to have effort in wholesome things. And in fact, Shantideva, when he defines effort, he says it is zeal in what is virtuous. So zeal in the right thing, morally good thing is the kind of effort that one must have. And then the same also with mindfulness. I think today we have mindfulness being practiced as a kind of a stress reducing therapy across the world. It helps people become very sharp and relaxed and effective. But then if you just leave it there, of course, mindfulness doesn't then necessarily become morally correct. You could have used the same that very good degree of focus and effectiveness to a totally wrong cause. So it's important then, therefore, to have the right form of mindfulness. And the right form of mindfulness, often in the Buddhist context, is expressed through 3 forms. One is carefulness, Bagyu in Tibetan, where one is asked to be careful about what is right and what is wrong in terms of one's engagement. And then the second is Denpa, awareness, often directly translated as mindfulness, to be aware, to be conscious of one's conducts, one's engagements all the time, to be aware and conscientious. And introspection or sheshin, which is to look at what one's body is up to, what one's speech is up to, what one's thoughts are up to always be sort of attentive to one's inner, what we call the 3 doors of communication. So I think it's important, especially in our current context, to have this kind of right mindfulness. In almost all engagements today, we are all very economic animals, you could say, either involved in some form of production or in some form of consumption. I mean, all of us are consumers, and in this new consumerist world, as we consume, if we are not mindful of what we are consuming, where do the products come from, how were they produced, have they caused harm to other beings? Like, have they caused displacement of wild animals, or have they caused pain to people through child labor or whatever? It's important to be always mindful in terms of consumption, and equally as businessmen or entrepreneurs, it's important to be mindful of what one is producing, how one is producing. So being very focused and sharp and relaxed in making arms, for instance, is some kind of mindfulness, but it is a very worldly mindfulness that is applied to a very bad cause. So it's morally wrong and bad. Whereas if one engages one's focus and mindfulness in a wholesome project, then that is what is required according to the Buddha's teaching. So we focus quite a lot on mindfulness, not only in terms of stress reduction and focus and relaxation and awareness, but also in terms of how one is engaging in the world, either as a producer or consumer. Things, but that focus, that point of focus could be a very negative, unethical thing. So it's important, again, to make sure that the point of focus is a wholesome. In the Buddhist context, it would often be focused on the way things are, the true nature of things like impermanence or emptiness, non-self, and so forth. So not only we try to look at the Four Noble Truths and the Right Eightfold Path as a very strategic way of problem solving and following a project, but also we put a focus on the word right, samyak, and make sure that it is an ethical, morally correct, morally positive practice. And I think the bare minimum, at least in the Buddhist context, what we can get from the Buddha is that one's actions, whatever one does, should not cause harm to other beings. And this is very simply put in the famous verse that sort of summarizes the teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha. Do not do any evil, engage in wholesome virtues, discipline one's mind fully. These are the Buddha's teachings, the core of the Buddha's teachings in these 4 lines. And I think the bare minimum is really non-harming. And Aryadeva again would say, as the Buddhas have taught, that Dharma in brief is non-harming. The most fundamental precept in the Buddhist teachings is to not cause any harm to sentient beings. So I think any project, any work one does should not cause any harm to anyone. And then if one can, of course, such a project can also help other beings through cultivation of loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, equanimity. So these are not only good in terms of sort of cultivating compassion and altruism in oneself, but one can use this as motivation for doing whatever work one does in life. And then we also try to bring in the 6 perfections, the perfection of giving, which is really to sacrifice and to put in, to sort of relinquish attachment and give wholeheartedly. And then to have discipline. And a lot of young people these days often lack discipline. So we talk a lot about discipline, not only as like Buddhist practice of discipline with vows and precepts, but even discipline as a regulated, disciplined daily way of life. And then about patience, not only of sort of bearing or the great difficulties, but also of being patient for one's result, of sort of working with patience to get a more sustainable long-term result. And then diligence, concentration, which we have discussed. So diligence is, we have discussed as effort. Concentration came as the 8th Eightfold Path. These are all very useful, even in the context of business and entrepreneurship, and particularly to have the bodhisattvic form of these for social entrepreneurs. And then, of course, the most important is wisdom, to have wisdom through critical thinking, to be able to analyze and examine and study things carefully through hearing, through reflection, and through practice. So the 6 perfections become very relevant to the pursuit of social entrepreneurship or any projects in life, in fact. Another thing that I recently found is this teaching from Shantideva in his Compendium of Training, where he talks about how a bodhisattva must give one's body, one's possessions, which also includes one's business, and all one's virtues to all sentient beings. So one must sort of dedicate one's body, possessions, and virtues to the benefit of all sentient beings. But having sort of dedicated them, then it's important for us to also protect them, to look after them. These 3 resources through which one can serve the sentient beings, one must protect. And then one must purify or refine them, make them better, make them more effective. And then finally expand them or scale them up. So think about a business. You need to really start a business with a wish to help others, to benefit others, and then try to secure the business, protect it, and then refine it and make it better, and then scale it up to have greater impact. So these 4 practices that Shantideva discusses, as this is the core of his Shiksha Samuchaya. These are so relevant and useful for one thinking about one's business as an artistic project and how one can sort of enhance it for the benefit of the world. So basically, we try to bring the culture of the heritage of wisdom and compassion in the Buddhist teachings into daily life, especially in the practice of social entrepreneurship. And of course, that comes through this, one of the biggest teachings through which we find the practice of wisdom and compassion in union is bodhicitta. And Shantideva makes again this great claim that those who wish to crush the many sorrows of existence and who wish to quell the pain of living beings, who wish to have experience of myriad joys, should never turn away from bodhicitta. I won't discuss bodhicitta in detail here, but if you are interested to know, this is something that I've been working on with the team at Sadra for the last 3 years or so. We have a website which you can see here if you are interested. You can go into this website and learn in detail about bodhicitta. We have discover section for beginners, explore section for intermediate learners, study section for advanced learners, and then practice section for those who want to get into practice. And then similarly, for about 5 years, we have created this website on Buddha nature. So bodhicitta is wisdom and compassion as a way of life, and Buddha nature, taking wisdom and compassion as our true nature. So do please visit the website. Today, I want to briefly take you through what we have been doing here in Bhutan in practicing what I've shared so far through the Lopen Foundation, which I started in 1999 as a student at Oxford. And today we are one of the leading educational charities in Bhutan, and we do 3 programs: education program, entrepreneurship program, and then cultural documentation program. The entrepreneurship program on which I want to focus, talking about bringing Buddha into business. We started that program mainly to minimize youth unemployment, which is still a major challenge in Bhutan, to reduce rural-urban migration, and then to also reduce import dependence and develop a self-sufficient economy. And then as Bhutan's private sector was very young, and it is still quite young, but 20 years ago, there was no private sector as such even. So as we started to have a private sector, we thought we could try out a different entrepreneurial business culture from what is the mainstream sort of capitalist, neoliberal economy in the rest of the world. So we started the project, and again, right at the core of it is this concept of interdependence, that when you start an entrepreneurial journey, first you need to have the primary inner asset, that power of the mind. And then you need to have a full view of the whole ecosystem and the different factors and conditions that are relevant, that are important for the success of the business. Then what we have been doing in terms of practice, we educate young people, most of the time trying to open up their minds to think differently, to think boldly, to find gaps in society and solutions to problems. And then giving also basic training in bookkeeping and branding and marketing and so forth, followed by a competition for capital funds. And we have been giving interest-free, collateral-free seed money. And so that will be through competition. And then after giving these funds with a strong contract, no collateral, but a moral obligation to pay back the capital, we then follow up with mentoring and monitoring support and creating a network of these entrepreneurs. And here are some of them. Two of our first ladies we support in 2008, one who started a dry retreating project and the other one who started a car paint shop. Then we have two from 2010, our first waste manager in Bhutan, who is still managing most of the waste from Thimphu, and the biggest waste manager or running the biggest waste business in the country. Then the other one who started a project to recycle, to refill printer cartridges. And then we have also in agriculture, for instance, people growing asparagus and herbal tea and green tea and so forth. Then we have people growing mushrooms and doing beekeeping, doing flower, horticulture and floriculture. Then we have people who have opened pharmacies and diagnostic centers, practicing traditional medicine or other kinds of health and spa practices. Then food processing, making chili pickle, for instance, which the Bhutanese love a lot. And then hospitality, bakeries and cafes and cultural guest houses and so forth. And then cultural traditional practices like weaving and embroidery, sewing, and the same also with pottery, carving, and woodworks, making prayer wheels or religious artifacts, doing traditional dyeing and golden smith work, printing prayer flags, doing traditional music and new forms of dance and so forth, and then children's toys and animation movies, religious art, to even a monk in our first batch who started making incense to support his monastery, and business to continue. So we started this entrepreneurship project in 2008. And to this day, after 19 years, we have funded 330 social ventures, 117 led by women. We've trained some close to 6,000 young people so far, and then created, I think, about 1,500 jobs. And some of our entrepreneurs also got international recognition. And then today we are from among those entrepreneurs and also other entrepreneurs who didn't financially support, we are looking at few projects that can scale up and accelerate. So we have a dairy farm, community dairy farming project, two food processing projects, then one air and water quality testing project, one fashion designer, and then one who uses waste plastic and turns that to make roads. So 6 projects that we have selected, and we have finished putting them through an acceleration program. So they are ready to now scale up and looking for investments. And this is the branch, the Center for Social Ventures, through which the scale up program is happening. if any one of you would be interested to know more about this, let me know. Overall, during the social entrepreneurship program and also the extended scale-up program, what we have among entrepreneurs is what we sometimes call Buddhist entrepreneurship mindset, a bodhisattva mindset to work for both oneself and others, to sort of be responsible producers and at the same time promote mindful consumption and be mindful consumers. And through that, hoping to develop a caring and compassionate economy, which is very much aligned to Bhutan's overall national philosophy or goal of development known as gross national happiness. So that is just an example of what I've been doing. My role as a Buddhist scholar is really to help these young people who need our help, but do so by bringing in the traditional sort of wisdom, the traditional sort of strengths that we already have. I often say I play a very modest role of being a translator, intermediate to reformulate timeless wisdom and make them relevant to the modern times, to our current society, not only here in Bhutan, but also hopefully to others around the world. Thank you. Jamyang, so that's it.
Thank you so much, Kamala.
Almost went up to an hour.
Yeah, perfect. And thank you. Really interesting. And congratulations also on all these projects you've worked on and for helping this develop and blossom. Really, it's very nice to see such a variety also for a small country with, as you say, a positive intention can do a lot, even if you're a very small country. And I know some of the products which you showed on there, like this Bhutan blossom, very nice. And tomatoes are very interesting for me as an Italian to see these tomatoes. So when I come to Bhutan, also I can see the tasted tomatoes you're doing. And if anybody would like to ask some questions, please, first of all, welcome to address any questions you may have to Karma. If you want to unmute yourselves, you can ask directly, or you can also write in the chat if there's any specific question you'd like. And meanwhile, maybe I could ask you if you could summarize in one or two sentences the kind of advice you would give as a guiding principle to anybody who's leading a business or is a director or something on that line, according to your experience, a universal guideline for everybody, very simple one.
I think we need to be very conscious of the interdependence or the interconnectedness of life. And if you have a very strong, deep sort of understanding of the interconnectedness of life, then automatically what one does will not be one that is harmful to others because of the interconnectedness, harming others at some point will also lead to harm to oneself. So I think the view of interdependence is crucial to help us have this ethical, non-harming approach, to sort of make sure that one's actions don't lead to any harm for anybody else or oneself even.
Thank you. Very good point. Would anybody like to ask any questions?
I think messages are disabled.
Okay, let me check if there are any messages. There's none yet.
I will deal with the messages, and meanwhile, if Anastasia, if you want to unmute yourself, please go ahead and ask.
Yes. Thank you so much. Hello. Thank you so much, Kama. Really inspiring talk. And I have a question around, I came across a new city called Kailash Mindfulness City, and I think you were involved. So my question is that how is it, how, I suppose, possible to embed this vision and this principle and Buddhist principles on the city scale, on a large city scale, and also open it to others who might come there maybe with potentially different mindset or potentially different attitudes. So what can be done to basically bring different partners, stakeholders to share this vision, and maybe starting from, let's say, small business, and then how can it be done in a city scale as well in the case of Kailash? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. So what little I know about Kailash Mindfulness City, which is initiated by His Majesty the King, is, as you know, Bhutan has had a fairly conservative approach to, a very protectionist approach to modern development, not wanting to jump on the bandwagon so fast and then regret losing our pristine environment and also rich cultural heritage, which of course is highly relevant, deeply connected to the well-being of the citizens. So while Bhutan continues pursuing what I presented earlier as gross national happiness, and keeping itself slightly protected, Bhutan also has the economic challenge of keeping our young people who now have exposure to anything happening beyond the borders through social media, through internet. They sort of expect or aspire to have higher economic sort of ways of living. And we have been losing quite a lot of young people to other countries, mainly Australia, Canada, and the Middle East. So in order to help Bhutan's economy get stronger, His Majesty has taken this project to a kind of a sandboxing approach, to have a specific part of Bhutan adopt a more sort of approach, but fast changes. At the same time, also making sure that there is gross national values embedded in it. It's going to be, it's a fairly big city, but still it's going to be like a case study, so to say. New approach, a more nimble approach to economic changes, and then slowly draw upon the strengths and the project to spill over the and strengths to the rest of Bhutan. And that is here being called the diamond strategy. So it is really like a sandboxing approach to help Bhutan's economy develop a little faster than what would be permitted in the rest of Bhutan, following the current environmental and cultural and many other rules and regulations that we already have in place.
Thank you. Thank you.
We have a question in the chat, which I'll read out from Mr. Lev Kiselev. How does one, as a Buddhist entrepreneur, deal with employees that do not share his vision and Buddhist vision overall?
Well, I think it is one thing to talk about Buddhism as religion, and I hope in the past hour I didn't give you that impression of spreading Buddhism as a religious practice. So I'm really trying here to extract the useful sort of messages, useful teachings in the Buddhist corpus, and then take them out of the religious context and present them as good ways of life. And I think mindfulness that we know of around the world is exactly that in a way. It is taken out of the Buddhist context and being used as a stress reduction practice, as a therapeutic practice, which is good. And I think for a lot of employees also, without necessarily becoming a Buddhist or believing in Buddhism as a religion, they could still draw on the wisdom from these traditions. Now, if they are against the values, that's a different story. Then we may need to really convince them through sort of consistent, persistent arguments, or may have to use different methods to convince them. But overall, if people think it's a religious practice, I can see why there will be some reservations. But it's important to see the Buddha's teachings also relevant on different levels of life. I think on a business level or in a normal secular life, there is a lot one can draw from not only Buddha, but also from other religious teachers. And here, because we are in a Buddhist country, we are using the Buddha more because it's much more easier and much more practical for us to relate our audience with the Buddha. But I'm sure you can find similar teachings from many other teachers. So perhaps, yeah, if the person is reluctant to take up Buddhist ideals, then maybe go to another source, Jesus or Confucius or whoever the person is more related to, and would probably believe more easily.
Thank you, Kamala. Is there anybody else who would like to ask any final questions, or is there anything else you would like to add, Karma?
Nothing. Well, I hope this is useful, because we are also sort of trying out these things here, hoping that they will have some change. But then, as we all know, the tide of change and also the currents of normal business, mainstream traditional form of capitalistic profiteering business is so strong. And most human beings, although we have the real Buddha nature in us, we are so obscured, our Buddha nature is so obscured, we are still selfish, very egoistic people. And I think it's very difficult to convince people to change the trend. But in spite of the challenges, it's worthwhile to always work on it. And I personally am optimistic, because in general, humanity in general is on a kind of a progressive development. Away from who we were, like, say, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, some centuries ago, there was a lot of injustice. There were a lot of inequalities, but we have come a long way. And then in the same way, we are going fast in terms of seeking better states of life. So I think in spite of the challenges, and there are a lot of challenges, I mean, we know, for instance, how many of the big leaders in the world wouldn't even come close to a bodhisattva mindset. The great leaders who are egoistic and full of themselves, arrogant, totally reckless in terms of seeking their own self-interest. And it's sometimes so saddening that a national self-interest is openly sought, instead of thinking about a global or a general sort of humanity or general sentient world. But in spite of all that, I think it's still important that we always push towards the right direction. And my hope is humanity will come back to senses. We take 2 steps forward and 1 step backward, and then again 2 steps forward. So it's not just a zero-sum game. I think we are adding value, we are progressing. And only if individuals, one by one, make that change, make that shift, we'll be able to succeed. And that's what we do here. Lopen is a small organization. The number of entrepreneurs we support are also quite few compared to the bigger number of business men and women. But still, with each of our batches of 10 to 15 entrepreneurs, we try to change their mindset. And hopefully, as we sort of add batch after batch, there will be some sort of ripples, some outcome accumulated. That's our hope.
Thank you, Kamala. I think we might have some questions. friends' faces have appeared on screen. Maybe.
If any one of you are interested in investing in these businesses or joining us as a mentor or a trainer or even intern, volunteer, do let us know. And if you go to Loden Foundation on the website, you will be able to find the contact very easily. Otherwise, ask Jamyang for my email address.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other questions? If no more questions, okay, Anastasia.
Sorry, I have a few actually, but another one. Based on what you shared about different businesses that you supported, I'm curious to hear how do you encourage the spirit of entrepreneurship? So what do you do? Let's say if a person doesn't do or has no interest, how to encourage the population or individuals to sort of take on that path?
If I give you a slightly long answer, so 20th century Bhutan, the concept of entrepreneurship, or at least the word entrepreneurship, was not known at all. Most college graduates, well, all college graduates and even school graduates would find a job in the government. And by beginning of the 21st century, the civil service was quite big and it was full. Today we have some 30,000 civil servants for 770,000 people or so. So one of the highest civil servant to citizen ratio in the world. So in the 21st century, a lot of the young people who finished colleges couldn't get into the government, let alone school graduates. And they ended up looking for jobs because they didn't want to go back to the farms as their parents did. So lot of youth unemployment, which led to also other social issues. And that's why we came in to help the state and other organizations who are also trying to address this issue of youth unemployment. And our main activity was to really, firstly, inspire them to become entrepreneurs. Because, somebody like me, when I went to school, we were all taught to aspire to become a government official, because that was seen as a most sort of respected and lucrative position to have. And then now it's much more difficult to become a government official than in the past. So a lot of people are they can't have the same sort of ambition. And then so our job was to really go and tell them that you can become an entrepreneur instead. And if you can have a good idea, we will support you. So we did that through, firstly, educational exposure sessions and capacity building sessions. And then to make sure that they're also, or the businesses we supported are also aligned to our own values, we said, you can get seed funding from us if you meet 4 criteria. And criteria 1, you have to, of course, have a financially viable business, because we have to get the money back from you so we can revolve it to other entrepreneurs in the future. Criteria 2 is that your project should be socially beneficial. You should have a social impact in forms of job creation, in forms of import substitution, in forms of solving a problem in society, filling a gap, etc. And number 3, we said your project should be environment friendly. So if it's logging or mining, that and especially mining irresponsibly, then we said we cannot support you. Then 4th, we said the project has to be also culturally sensitive to the local cultural context. So, for instance, a slaughterhouse would have made probably good money, but we said, no, sorry, we can't support this because it would be against the feelings of the local population. So with these 4 criteria, we make a lot of the sort of what we would call a non-social entrepreneurship projects, non-Buddhist projects, ineligible. So we have managed to use attract projects only that are aligned to our values.
Thank you.
It.
Okay, then Kamala, thank you so much. And good luck with all your work and projects. I know you're working also on Buddhist philosophy and research and translation with Sadra Group. Also many conferences. You're very busy. You were in Europe just now. So this is just one of the many aspects of your work. So it's very interesting to see also all the results. I remember, I think gosh, what was it? Maybe 2012 or something. You were in London also at the time. There was Dorje who worked for Lopen Foundation. So I heard about it a long time ago. And it's beautiful to see how it evolved so much. So really congratulations for all your work. For helping.
Yes, so I don't know if this was clear, but I work as an academic researcher, mainly working with the old Tibetan and Bhutanese archives and texts, and then doing academic writings based on them, sometimes teaching as well. But with Loden, it was something that I started with a wish to give other people the kind of opportunities I got in my life in terms of education. So we started in 1999, 26 years ago. And of course, many other people joined hands. So it's a journey that involves so many hundreds of people. And we have, as we speak, a branch in the UK, a charity that's a sister organization in the UK, and one in France, which mainly covers the Eurozone. And then we have also people who are helping us in Japan, Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, and in Europe, Switzerland and Hungary. I don't think we have any active work going on in Italy. So if anyone would be interested to join us as our representative in Italy, you're most welcome. And then also one of the things I want to share, as I said earlier, is if you wish to invest in Bhutan, the Gelugpa Mindfulness City, which is happening under the aegis of His Majesty the King, is a wonderful opportunity, especially if you're thinking of big projects. But if you're thinking of something smaller, Bhutan is becoming more and more conducive for foreign investors. And we have our own projects, particularly those 6 that I shared, which are almost investment ready, you could say. So it's really a collaborative work that we have, and we hope some of you will take interest and join us.
Thank you so much again. And very last chance for questions. If anybody wants to jump in, make a final comment.
Yes, comments and criticism is also welcome.
Jambian, can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Mark. Welcome.
Yeah. Yes. Hello, Kama. This is Mark Fountain. Enjoyed your talk very much. I don't know that I have a specific question, but I just wanted to share with you that I was fascinated to hear how you approached applying the Buddhist philosophy to encouraging entrepreneurs, because I've run a charitable foundation endowment for the last 10 years, where we've tried to apply what I call the Buddhist overlay in terms of the investment strategy. Because I've had long career in asset management, and I was familiar with ethical funds management as a category, but I'd never seen anyone apply a Buddhist overlay. And so as we just invest in listed stocks, the way we've run a Buddhist overlay to determine which companies to invest in and back is kind of untested territory. And I'm just always fascinated to learn how someone else has applied this lens to decide which type of companies or entrepreneurs to support, and then, what you used as your criteria to decide that, or whether it's just simply focusing on the intentions of the entrepreneur and the owner, rather than what they do in practical terms for their business. So I just want to say thank you. I've enjoyed the topic very much, and I feel like I have 100 questions that might be better addressed in a different format, but I enjoyed very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. But I think your kind of background and expertise is what we need for you to advise us, to critique us. We are trying something different, but then you could say it's a case study, an experimental project. But if it works, I think it holds good value for many areas in other parts of the world, especially similar native Buddhist communities would be able to benefit from it. So we here in Bhutan, we were really thinking how we can make this more effective and successful, so that we can take the same scheme to places like Thailand and Burma, Nepal and China, and especially in China. Their economy is booming right now, and a lot of the Chinese, not all of them certainly, but a lot of them are also very Buddhist in their religious orientation. So we thought it would be very good to develop something. And I mean, we need to learn a lot more from other practices. And in Europe, I'm sure you have a lot of things that are informed or inspired by Christianity. I think Protestantism plays a big role in the business culture or business mindset of people in Europe. So it'd be nice.
Actually, it's interesting. The countries you listed when we first set up the endowment, because there was no literature available in ethical funds management category within Europe and the US, because as you mentioned, most of the ethical funds were Christian, Judeo-Christian value-based. So I did a fair amount of research on Thailand, on Japan, Korea, Vietnam, China, India, Nepal, and Bhutan, not at that time, because you hadn't set up a sovereign wealth fund or anything like that yet. But in particular, I was interested if Buddhism is a national religion for a country, when the country sets up its sovereign wealth fund, what was the ethical guidance that they used to determine their investment strategies? Honestly, I couldn't find very much literature. Most of the academic work was either Japanese or Indian. I would say those were the two countries most active in this area. But yeah, I tried to search for inspiration from all of the Theravada Buddhist countries and things as well that you have mentioned, like Thailand and Vietnam. And I found it a very underdeveloped space. So I think it's such an encouragement to see Bhutan slowly take the path that it has, with all of its national strategies as well as its grassroots strategies like this. It can help to inform the space very much.
Thank you. And please do share the insights you have to strengthen our approach. Yes, as you said, on a national level, I think there is the gross national happiness. That is the sort of overarching concept or overarching theme that all big state level or even private sector practices are supposed to be guided by. And then on a grassroots level, it's organizations like us who are trying to sort of really implement it with concrete conditions and steps. So we will gain a lot from getting your experience and feedback.
Thank you very much.
I see that we have a last question from the indefatigable Anastasia. Very curious, Anastasia. Is there an interest or consideration in opening Bhutanese businesses more open or accessible to global audiences?
Yes, Anastasia, thank you for the question. So Jamyang earlier mentioned Bhutan blossoms. That's a very good example. Now, if you look at Bhutan itself, the country is very small. I mean, the land mass is not that small. We are, I think, like Netherlands and Switzerland, roughly. But in terms of market size, in terms of population, we are really small and almost insignificant on a global level. So if we are to help some of these businesses grow and scale up, we have no choice but to look at external markets. So Bhutan Blossoms, for instance, is one that is exporting risotto and many other products to places like I think Europe and definitely Australia and maybe also the US. I'm not sure how. Again, we are facing two different constraints. There is the constraint of the market, so we are looking for external market, but then there's also constraint on supply. Because of the demographic challenges, we also have difficulties in production. So Bhutan has to more or less sort of edge towards niche product economy. So Bhutan Blossom is a good example. Then even the girl, the fashion designer, she uses traditional textiles to make new sort of designs. So we have to really look at a niche product for a high-end market outside of Bhutan. And I think Bhutan is far more ready now for this than it was ever in the past. Having said that, we still face serious hurdles in terms of supply chain and logistics because the entrepreneurs are too small on their own to build the whole supply chain from here to Italy or Switzerland or wherever. So we need to have some system where they can perhaps aggregate the different products and ship them. And then also have maybe somebody who will work on the legal aspects of all this. So those are the big challenges. But there is a lot of work being done today. There are far more Bhutanese goods going out to Bhutan to distant markets today than before. Of course, to India, it is fairly easy. So a lot of the Bhutanese commodities have been going to India in the past and continues to do so even now, including hydropower, which is one of the biggest exports we have. So the short answer is yes, Bhutan is opening up, and not only for investors to come in, but a lot of the investors also come in for products and services that are sold to the global audience. There's a lot of investment in high-end resorts here, and that's because tourism is picking up. There are high-end travelers coming to Bhutan. If you just look at the Bhutanese market, there won't be much market for high-end resorts here. In fact, none, perhaps. The short answer is yes, it's opening up, and I think it's a good place to invest in if you're particularly looking for this niche, high-end kind of products and services. Because Bhutan has managed, this is the positive thing that has happened in the last 20 years or so. Bhutan has managed to develop a brand, a happiness brand, a sort of a progressive, holistic brand. So a lot of the products that come out of Bhutan can go for a high value market because of this association with Bhutan. And I think it's important for Bhutan and investors to leverage this brand that we have created and not to lose it also.
Thank you, Karma. And in the chat, they're asking about getting in touch. If you allow me to, I would share your email in here. I have the @Tsadra email. Is it okay to write to you there, or do you prefer at another email?
Use this one. Tsadra I use mainly for my work.
Okay.
This one would be better for the loading work.
Perfect.
For the charity I do.
Thank you. And just another thing, perhaps some of you are familiar here on the Shangshung UK. We have a YouTube website, and we have many talks, including this talk, which is being recorded now, and it will go up on the YouTube channel. And we do have maybe 5 or 6 talks about Bhutan, more cultural, historical, literature, Buddhist, founders of Bhutan, various talks. So if you're particularly curious about Bhutan, you can look on the channel. We had several experts on Bhutan give talks, so it was really nice to have you, Karma, today. Karma is really considered one of the foremost intellectual bright minds of Bhutan. I don't say it lightly, and you all saw it. So really nice to see you, Karma. And also, we do organize trips to Bhutan. Last time, Shangshung Institute UK, when we were in Bhutan, just by chance, we met in the middle of the highway at a cafe with Karma, with our group. And we said that next time we organize a trip, we'll also come to visit Karma at his offices or maybe even in his village. He comes from a beautiful village called Ura. also there. Very interesting projects going on, traditional architecture, beautiful festivals. So really, it's a wonderful country, Bhutan. And please join our newsletter if you're interested to travel to Bhutan. We're planning a trip next spring. Hopefully, will coincide with our schedules. And again, Karma, thank you for coming. I know for a long time we spoke about you giving a talk. Finally, we managed, and hopefully it will be the first of many talks that we can do together. So thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Jamyang.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Bye-bye.